of Baltimore, Maryland. Mr. Abare was detained on Wednesday in Pennsylvania and had his initial appearance that same day in Baltimore. Miss English had her initial appearance on Wednesday in Miami, where she was when the indictment was unsealed on Wednesday. And Mr. Ulysses was taken into custody this morning, and we expect his initial appearance sometime soon. As you know, an indictment contains allegations, and all defendants are presumed innocent until their guilt is proven in court. As alleged in the indictment, these three defendants were part of a nationwide scheme that was both ruthless and well organized, that targeted elderly victims by preying on their love for their grandchildren. This wide-reaching conspiracy, which AUSA Maddox has dubbed a family crisis fraud scheme, operated throughout 2018 up until November 2019. In general, members of the scheme called elderly victims on the phone and falsely told these victims that a loved one, typically a grandchild, was in a precarious situation, such as having been in a car accident or was arrested for a crime. In making these phone calls, these conspirators typically posed as a police officer or a lawyer or some other position of apparent authority. And they told the victims that their grandchild needed thousands of dollars for some urgent purpose, such as bail money or legal fees. I should note that during these phone calls, the elderly grandparent victims were often told that because of the urgency and seriousness of the matter, such as their grandchildren were injured or narcotics were found in their vehicle or some other situation like that, that the money had to be sent immediately. Now, any parent or grandparent can relate to the fear and the urgency to act that these victims were experiencing when they received those phone calls. The elderly victims here were told to mail thousands of dollars to particular addresses throughout the country. And members of the scheme, including these three defendants who we charged, were involved in identifying residential locations throughout the country where the victims would mail the money. In addition to Maryland, they used addresses in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Florida. The members of the schemes tended to use residences that were either vacant or on the market for sale so that no one else would be there when the packages of money arrived from the victims. These victims were tricked into sending thousands and thousands of dollars via UPS and FedEx and the U.S. Postal Service for the apparent purpose of helping their grandchild. After packages arrived at these locations, some of which were in the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. regions, members of this conspiracy were there to pick up the packages. Now, as detailed in this indictment, Mr. Ulysses recruited and paid others to travel to states, including Maryland, to pick up these packages that had been sent by victims. Mr. Abarai and Miss English were both involved in picking up packages of money. They did it themselves, and they also directed others to do it. For example, in January of 2019, Mr. Abarai traveled from Florida to Maryland to pick up packages of cash, some up to $10,000, that had been mailed to Maryland by victims who were living in Utah, Virginia, and New York. Mr. Ulysses and Miss English at times were given packages by other members of the conspiracy. And Miss English tracked packages on the internet, and she relayed tracking and delivery information to other members of the conspiracy who were on the ground in states to pick up the cash. This family crisis fraud scheme was both ruthless and heartless. It was also well organized, and it was successful. The indictment alleges that this conspiracy defrauded more than 70 elderly victims of at least $1.5 million. Now, I should note that members of this conspiracy were located throughout North America, and law enforcement from other jurisdictions, specifically in Indiana and Canada, have been conducting investigations related to this scheme. And I would like to thank those other jurisdictions for their collaboration and for their commitment to pursuing justice in this important case. Here in the District of Maryland, in addition to these 3 defendants, we previously charged 2 other members of the conspiracy. McArnold Charlemagne pled guilty to mail fraud conspiracy on October 29th of 2020. And David Green of Florida pled guilty to mail fraud conspiracy on November 3rd, 2020. I would like to give a special thanks to SAC Boone and her team for the terrific job they did conducting this investigation. They conducted a meticulous and thorough investigation involving more than 70 victims spread out across the country. And they conducted this investigation and developed it relatively quickly during a global health pandemic. I would also like to thank AUSA's Maddox and Delaney, who will be handling this case in court. In conclusion, let me add that these defendants not only stole thousands of dollars from elderly victims, some of whom are in retirement, but they also fabricated alarming stories about the grandchildren of these victims, which is a nightmare for any grandparent. And for these victims, the nightmare continued even when they knew that their loved ones were okay, because then they found out that they had been victims of a serious fraud. Elder justice is a priority for our office and for the FBI, and this kind of case is exactly the kind of impactful case that our office will always investigate and prosecute. I'm now going to turn it over to SAC Boone.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Boone of the FBI's Baltimore Field Office. As the acting U.S. Attorney noted, I'm joined by ASAC Joe Gordon and SSA Keith Custer, who led the outstanding team of agents, analysts, and forensic accountants who conducted this investigation. This case is a true example of international enforcement cooperation, leading to multiple indictments, enforcement cooperation, arrests, and the wide-scale disruption of a transnational organized crime group that was mercilessly preying on elderly Americans. Victims across the country sent overnight packages filled with cash to vacant and abandoned properties all over the United States, including locations in Baltimore City, thinking they were saving a loved one, when in fact they were losing thousands of dollars to this sophisticated criminal enterprise. This investigation has identified over 70 U.S. victims with fraud losses in excess of $1.5 million. But that is only one piece of a larger conspiracy, and the actual numbers of victims are likely much higher. As the acting U.S. Attorney mentioned, this is not a new investigation, but one that has developed over time. In December 2019, McArnold Charlemagne and David Green were indicted for conspiracy to commit mail fraud, and both have since pleaded guilty. But the scheme involved many more people, and today we are announcing 3 additional indictments, as well as arrests in Maryland, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Additionally, our law enforcement partners in Canada also conducted numerous arrests of individuals they believe are responsible for making the scam calls that targeted the elderly victims here in the United States. Working in partnership with Sûreté du Québec in Canada, the FBI proactively worked with state and local law enforcement partners and the private sector to intercept numerous fraud packages and interview victims, identify additional members of the conspiracy, and return funds to victims. I would like to thank all of the many state and law enforcement agencies that responded to our requests for assistance on short notice and were instrumental in furthering the investigation. I would especially like to thank the following partners that executed local warrants and arrests that greatly advanced our case: the Newcastle County Police Department in Delaware, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office in Florida, and the Glen Olden Police Department and Delaware County District Attorney's Office in Pennsylvania. These arrests, working with our law enforcement partners across the country and in Canada, demonstrate the FBI's determination to stop these egregious crimes and should serve as a warning to those who would seek to profit by threatening and terrorizing seniors. What the members of this group are accused of doing is not just illegal, it is shameful. Driven by absolute greed, we believe the group preyed on and stole from seniors in what should be their golden years. The FBI would also like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that elder fraud is a serious, growing threat, and the criminals behind it are becoming more sophisticated. Seniors are a particularly vulnerable group and are often specific targets of financial fraud crimes because of their unique life situation and financial position. To avoid becoming a victim, seniors are encouraged to remember that government officials will never threaten you over the phone or demand payment in cash, prepaid cards, or gift cards. Seniors should also protect their personal information and not divulge it over the phone, through mail, or on the internet unless they initiated the contact. They should talk over investments with a trusted friend, family member, or financial advisor. Lastly, seniors should resist the urge to act quickly or secretly, which are frequent tactics used by scammers. The FBI has prioritized our efforts to address elder fraud and will continue to do so along with our domestic and international partners. If you believe you are a victim of fraud or know a senior who may be, regardless of financial loss, please immediately report the incident to your local FBI field office or other law enforcement agency. You can report to the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at tips.fbi.gov or to the Internet Crime Complaint Center at www.ic3.gov. You can also find additional information about elder fraud by going to the FBI.gov website and searching elder fraud. Thank you. And back to the Acting United States Attorney.
Okay, we'd be glad to address any questions about this case.
I just
Ma'am.
have one question.
Yes.
Can you pronounce the full name of Egil Saracen? I don't even know. Did somebody pronounce his name?
Matthew, you want to try that?
I'll give it a try. Ego Cesare Avboraye Igbendinian.
What he said.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Was there a local victim that spurred the FBI here to take this case on, or how did you guys become the
Well, my understanding is that there are victims throughout the country,
Right.
and there may be some victims in Maryland. I think at this point, considering that we just brought the indictment, I really can't say anything else about how the investigation started, unless S.A. Boone, okay. I'll leave it at that.
You made a tantalizing comment about it being part of a bigger conspiracy. I mean, is there anything else you can say about that?
Well, we can say that these three defendants, as well as the two who we charged last year, were part of a wide-ranging conspiracy involving multiple defendants located throughout North America. Many of these people had different roles. The three defendants, as we talked about, had particular roles that we discussed in the indictment, but they worked with others throughout North America on this scheme.
It's not like you're saying there's more schemes beyond this elder fraud scheme.
Well, at this point, as you know, we can only discuss what's in the publicly filed indictment.
And also, do you have any idea how these folks found each other? I mean, people being all over the country, even other countries, any idea how they networked?
Are you talking about the defendants in this case?
Yes.
I'm not sure we're in position to discuss beyond what's in the indictment. When you say how they networked, do you mean how they met each
I'm
other?
just wondering how people in Florida and Canada and Baltimore all linked up to carry this out. If they met online, if they I don't know.
At this point, I can't go beyond the four corners of the indictment, but thank you. It's a good question.
In addition to the mail fraud, the conspiracy to commit mail fraud, what other charges are being considered here?
Well, the investigation continues. I mean, as you know, we charged 2 defendants late last year, and we've charged 3 more this week. And the investigation continues, and, whatever charges the evidence can prove, certainly we'll bring those charges.
How many charged defendants are there between, you're referring to the previous 2, the 3 here, but it sounds like there's an awful lot more people arrested in other jurisdictions perhaps. How many defendants are charged?
I don't have an answer to that question, Justin. We can get back to you with that. There's a case in Indiana, and then there's law enforcement action in Canada. But I don't have the specific number. We can get that to you.
In general terms, not case specific, but in general terms, do they use social media? Like, I know my mother's very interested in her grandkids, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. How do they end up sort of reaping these targets, these victims?
Well, are you asking in terms of how they contacted them, or how did they identify the victims?
Identify a set of grandparents to go after in general terms.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Keith Custer to address that question.
Hi, my name is Keith Custer. I'm a supervisory special agent at FBI Baltimore. So I believe in this case we work closely with the Sûreté du Québec, where we believe the fraud calls originated. In speaking with the investigators in Canada, investigation up there has revealed that the people that we believe were making the calls in Canada were provided weekly with long lists of mostly elderly victims, probably obtained through normal commercial processes, mailing list, call lists, and things like that. The fraudsters, we believe, made as many as 1,000 or 1,200 calls a day with a very low success rate, but obviously once they would get an active victim on the line, they would milk that for as much as they can.
And they must be very convincing. I mean, are these Academy Award winners that are on the phone? Because when we run these stories, most people sitting at home say, "Oh, that could never happen to me," but it obviously happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. These individuals, and there are a number of them working in conjunction, each playing a different role as a police officer or a lawyer or even a member of the family. So they're very well rehearsed. They know exactly the levers to pull, whether it's fear or concern or even monetary reasons. But they're very skilled. Calling from Canada, they don't have very heavy accents like some of our West African or other Jamaican scams and things like that. So this particular network was very effective and obviously perpetrated a long-running scheme. Our investigation started in 2018, and this wider conspiracy was operating all the way up until last week. So.
Okay.
Are there pictures of these individuals?
We're not allowed to provide pictures of defendants.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Mr. Leinster, I have a question for you. What are you able to tell us about the investigation into the city state's attorney right now?
Well, as you can imagine, we never discuss the existence or non-existence of any investigation. So, like any situation, we never discuss the existence or non-existence of any investigation, and you should not interpret my answer to suggest one way or the other.
Understood.
Without asking about that investigation, nonetheless, 2 prominent city officials, including your law enforcement partner, are making accusations about the integrity of this office. Can you speak to the integrity of this office and its investigators?
In general, our office always conducts investigations with the utmost integrity, and I think our record over the years has proven that. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. That's it.
Can't have a business card. I might try to use it.
Are there pictures of the